Disclaimer: all the story and images/graphics used in the video belong to their respective owners. I or this channel do not claim any rights over them, all credits to the respected owner. Chapter 1: 100 Times Income Multiplier System. Jack arrived before the store. It was named Alfonso's Grocery Store. This was the store that he'd just bought over to start his life here in the city. He had spent more than half of his years of savings to buy it alongside the groceries inside. He wasn't going to change the name, as the store that he was opening was only temporary. If things go well, he would absolutely find a better location. He could see that it was a decent one. Furthermore, the location of the store wasn't bad too, as he could see that it wasn't hidden in some corner. Around the store, there were some other stores that were already open as it was already afternoon. But the business at this time wasn't that good as the traffic was mainly in the morning and evening. Jack took out the keys that he'd received from the agency and opened the grocery store. As he entered, he found that the store was tidy. There was a counter where he would be operating the store closer to the door. It was located at the right side of the door. Then, he could see that there were rows of shelves and fridges that were holding the stock that he was supposed to sell. After confirming that everything was okay, he sat at the counter. He wanted to start working immediately. After all, he couldn't afford lazing around when there were some people who thought so lowly of him. Since it was still afternoon, there were no customers at all. Furthermore, Jack decided not to add stock at all and retained everything that was present there. He would see the way that the business goes before he can add more stock. Currently, most of the things that he was selling were those that didn't need to be fresh. They were things like packed milk, noodles, and so on. These things had a shelf life and Jack had confirmed that they had not expired. As for the prices, there was no need for him to worry at all. The prices were written on the shelves. Furthermore, this store could be considered a mini-mart. If he wanted to efficiently operate it, he would need to have at least 2 people to assist him. But that would have to wait for later. Currently, he was reading the logbook of the store. It seems that the previous owner of the store was in such a hurry that he left the records of the sales. From how he was seeing, the business wasn't that bad at all. So, he read the records as he familiarized himself with the store's sales and purchases. It was around 5 in the evening that the first customer came in. It was a man who seemed to be in his mid-30s. It was rare to find men going to a grocery store, but Jack didn't find it bizarre as he was a man and was operating it. He stood up and welcomed the man. "Hello, how may I help you?" "I'd like some groceries. I'm going to work and I can't be coming to the grocery every day. So, I want those that can last a good period of time," the man replied. Jack showed him into the store and the man began picking some groceries. He picked rice, flour, sugar, and several other things. Of course, the purchase wasn't in bulk, but for a person living alone, they could last him at least a week. "Why don't you have vegetables?" The man frowned after seeing that there were no vegetables in the store. Jack knew that this was going to happen. So, he calmly explained, the store was closed for 2 days and if they would have brought the vegetables, they wouldn't have been fresh. So, the vegetables would be coming in tomorrow. The man nodded as he found this reasonable. Nobody wanted groceries that weren't fresh if there was another place that they could get those that were fresh. The man came to the counter to pay. After calculating, he found that the bill was $300. This wasn't that much due to the low quality of the products that could be found in this kind of street. After all, one had to know that this was the poorest street in the entire city. So, it was obvious that the products being sold here would match the residents in terms of price. If he brought things that cost thousands per kg, then it was obvious that people wouldn't buy them, or those who would be buying them would be counted by a single hand. After all, the depths of the pockets talked about what a person would eat. The man touched his pockets, but after a while, he found that there was no wallet there. So, he looked at Jack with a sorry expression as he said, "It seems that I was in so much hurry that I forgot my wallet. Can I do transfer?" Jack nodded. There was no problem at all as long as the payment was done. So, he gave his account number and the man sent the money before leaving immediately. It seemed that he was in a hurry to do something. As soon as the bank confirmation message arrived, Jack heard a robotic voice in his head. Ding! Congratulations on activating the 100 times income multiplier. Ding! You've earned $300. Multiplier applied. You've received $30,000. Ding! First income. As a reward, you gain a Suzuki GSX-R 1000. The voice rang 3 times in that it made Jack feel like he was hallucinating. But the fact was that he has never taken any drug, so he felt that there was no way that he could be hallucinating. 100 times income multiplier? What's this? Jack asked himself. Before he could think further, the phone in his hand vibrated. Upon looking at the screen, Jack was dumbfounded. Flyer's bank account received $30,000. New balance is $278,861. That message confirmed the second message about his income being multiplied by 100 times. Now, what was all this about? Ding! You are the lucky host of the Blue Planet. You've been selected by the 100 times income multiplier system. With this system, as long as you earn any income by the rightful means, then it will be multiplied by 100 times. Ding! There are things that will be multiplied by 100 in terms of quality and others would be multiplied in terms of quantity. The robotic voice echoed in his head as the explanation about what was happening immediately got explained to him. Jack wasn't sure if he was dreaming or hallucinating, maybe both? He pinched his arm and felt the pain. This meant that all of this was real. Furthermore, the bank message confirmed that he had indeed received $30,000 in his account after the transaction was done. After taking a moment to cool himself down, Jack sat on the chair behind the counter and asked in his mind, "Can you tell me more about the system?" Ding! I am your guide, Angel. I will help you with matters concerning the system. So, for the question that you've just asked, the system is something supernatural that's out of the Blue Planet. Of course, you're not qualified to know about the origins of the system. Ding! The system's main function is to make sure that people don't get lazy. You will be an example. By working hard, your rewards will be great. So, the system will reward you for your hard work by multiplying the income that you receive from working hard by 100 times. Ding! Of course, there's a limitation. Anything that's not earned by working cannot be multiplied. So, don't you think of cheating? Jack thought for a moment and couldn't help but get excited. This was beyond his imaginations. But he could only thank his lucky stars in that, among the billions of people in the Blue Planet, the system had chosen him. Then, he thought of something. Is there any other person in the planet that has a system? Ding! Negative. There's nobody else with a system in the Blue Planet as it is a unique. There are no copies. Jack, for some reason, let out a sigh of relief. Then, he couldn't help but get excited. As long as he could work hard and expand his business, then he would really get something bigger. This was something that he was really looking forward to. Ding! There's another program. The reward system. Your first income in each and every business branch will make you receive a reward from the system. Ding! There's another reward that is monthly reward, semi-annual reward, yearly reward, decade reward, century reward, millennium reward, and so on. Jack's mouth was forced to stay wide open after hearing the system's words. He could understand the first reward, monthly, and even a decade reward. But what the hell with the century and millennium rewards? Did the system want him to work hard for a whole century? No, scratch that, a millennium? That's 1,000 years we're talking about here. Not talking about a person who's dedicated for 100 years of working, it was a question whether that person would be able to live that long. And what's more, according to the current calendar, it had only been 2 millenniums since the first time that they started counting. Now, just how many generations had gone by in the 2 millenniums? Jack calmed himself down and asked, how on earth am I supposed to live for a millennium? Ding! With the system, as long as the host works hard, nothing is impossible. You mean that I can become an immortal? Be able to fly? He couldn't help but start imagining. Ding! That's right. And the system confirmed this. Jack wanted to jump off his seat and run around shouting about his luck. But he still managed to calm himself down. "By the way, where's my reward for the first income?" Jack asked. Ding! The key is inside the drawer of the counter. The motorcycle is parked outside the store. Jack opened the drawer and found the key. It seemed that the system was right. But how on earth did the key get inside the drawer? Well, not like it matters. He'll just receive the reward. He was just about to go out of the store and take a look at the motorcycle when a person entered the store. It was a lady in her early 20s. "Hello, I need some groceries," she said as soon as she saw Jack behind the counter. Since he was having a customer, then he would surely make sure to operate the store first before checking out the bike. Chapter 2, Alfonso Family, How It All Began. Note, the following 3 chapters are mainly about how Jack became the way he was now. That morning, Jack walked slowly across the pathway. Although he was there, his mind was wandering around. He was completely ignoring the wonderful scenic view of flowers that were planted along the pathway that he was following. There were several colors that made this place look like the most decorated garden, but surprisingly it wasn't. On the sides, apart from the flowers of different colors and species, there were some of the rare trees that were planted there. There were several servants on the side either doing cleaning or maybe going somewhere to carry out the errands that they had been assigned to. After a few more moments, he arrived in front of a majestic mansion that stood tall and proud. This mansion was exuding both beauty and majesty at the same time. It was so huge not only in terms of length and width, but it had 7 floors. The mansion was painted turquoise. There were some areas that were painted white as well, but the turquoise color dominated the mansion. As he got at the door, those servants at the door didn't even bother to open the door for him. Without bothering that much, he pushed the double doors open by himself as he entered the mansion. Humph, that useless boy is here again. He knows that they don't love him, but he keeps on trying his luck. It's not like he can do anything anyway. He has never been given a company to manage. What company can he manage? He's never going to get a chance in this family. Well, you're right, his mother is gone. Now, there's nobody in the family that cares about him because of his behavior. As soon as he entered, he could clearly hear the 2 servants at the entrance of the mansion talking about him with voices filled with contempt. "Oh, look at who's back. I thought that you wouldn't dare to come back here." As he was ignoring those that were speaking of him, he heard an arrogant voice coming from his front. He raised his lowered head and directly stared into the eyes of the young man in front of him. The person could be said to be handsome, but not by a great deal. He had short blonde hair that was well kempt. His green eyes filled with both arrogance and contempt as they stared at him. He was currently wearing a green shirt with a black blazer on top of it. As for pants, he was wearing a black trouser. Since they were inside the mansion, he was wearing his sandals. "You mean that Jack is back?" "I also thought that he wouldn't come back at all." Before he could say a single word in reply, a female voice sounded from the living room. Then, followed by the sounds of footsteps, a girl of height of 1.7 m approached them. Just like the blonde before him, she had blonde hair, a beautiful face with a rating of at least 85. Her eyes were green as well. Currently, she was wearing a knee-length beige dress that outlined her features. Unlike his eyes filled with arrogance, her eyes were filled with slyness like that of a fox. Although she looked cute, Jack clearly knew that she was anything but cute. Amongst the 2, she could be said to be the worst. "I thought that you said that you were going to look for a way to fend for yourself. Why are you back now?" she asked as soon as she arrived before the 2. Jack looked at her before he looked at her brother, whose name was Steve. He simply shook his head without saying a word and went past them via the side. Seeing that he was ignoring them, the 2 of them didn't like it at all. So, Steve immediately blocked Jack's path once again. Jack frowned but still tried getting past him via another side. He had just gotten past Steve only to find that Brenda was blocking his path. Although the corridor that led to the living room was big, with the 2 siblings moving from side to side, Jack couldn't get past them. He had no choice but to stop and stare at them with frustration. And for the first time, he spoke, "What do you want?" His voice wasn't loud and neither was it low, but it contained a kind of male charm. you know what we want from you. Just tell us, why are you back? Didn't you boldly say that you would go and fend for yourself? Steve asked with a mocking smile on his face. Jack was the fourth son of the Alfonso family. There were 4 sons in the family. The firstborn son was Arnold, followed by Steve, then David followed, and finally there was Jack. As for the daughters of the Alfonso family, there was Cindy, who was the firstborn daughter in the family, then following behind her was Diana, and finally, there was Brenda. Jack's father had 2 wives and a single mistress. The first wife was called Marion. She was the mother to Arnold, Steve, and Brenda. The second wife was called Lucy. She was the mother to Cindy and David and Diana, who were twins. As for Jack, his mother was the mistress. Unluckily, or maybe luckily, he was the only child of the mistress, and in terms of age, Arnold took the lead. He was 28 years old. Following closely behind was Cindy, who was 27. After that, was Steve, who was currently 24. David and Diana came next. They were both 23. Following them was Brenda, who was 21. Then, Jack came last. He was 19 this year. Apart from having to show respect to all his siblings who were older than him, he still had to go through a lot in the hands of their scheming mothers. Jack had always been mistreated, especially since his mother's demise 4 years ago. At that time, his life had become increasingly hard as there was nobody that loved him in the family. Although his father would sometimes help him, his help was just superficial as it solved nothing for him. As for his grandfather, he and his grandmother hated him. According to what he heard, they didn't like the fact that his father was keeping a mistress. They said that this was tarnishing the reputation of the family. So, they never loved her offspring, as well as he was a sign of that black spot on the clean family reputation. As for his uncles and aunts, there were some that were like his siblings or his grandparents. Of course, there were those that didn't care about what was happening at all. There were cousins too. But, just like his half-siblings, there were many of them that didn't like him at all. After all, Alfonso family wasn't a small family. Alfonso family was one that had assets that were worth at least $700 million. They were the biggest family that was the overlord of Crystal City. Here in Crystal City, they were monopolizing almost every industry. They had spread their influence to another city called Volant City. But, their influence there wasn't as great as it was in Crystal City. Jack had tried so much to endure all the things that they were putting him through. But the end result was that he couldn't take it anymore after his mother passed away. He had began saving whatever little money he was receiving from the family. He had been doing so since his mother was alive. At that time, he was still 13. In other words, he had been saving money for at least 6 years now. And since he couldn't take this anymore, he decided that it was time for him to move on and try his luck and see if he could do something with the education level that he had. The previous day, he had left the mansion claiming that he was going to get independent. He had gone around Crystal City to look for an opportunity and see if there was a chance for him to start his life. But, after going around the place, he found that the influence of the Alfonso family was too great. There was nowhere in Crystal City that they didn't have a hand in. Since his half-siblings didn't like him, he was sure that once he started anything here in Crystal City, they would make sure that he failed. So, the only solution that he came up with was to leave Crystal City and go to another city that had no influence of Alfonso family. And so, he had slept in a hotel room the previous night. Today, he was here so that he could take his belongings before leaving. I am leaving today, so you don't have to worry about me, Jack said to the 2 who were blocking his path. Oh, I see. So, where are you planning on going to? Steve raised his brows and asked. It's not like you have to know that, Jack replied. At this time, Brenda pulled Steve to the side, opening a path for him. Although Steve didn't like the fact that Jack didn't reply to his inquiry, he decided to go alongside Brenda. He knew that although she was younger than him, she wasn't someone that he could mess with. So, she indeed had to have a plan. She then said, "Oh, no problem at all. We can help you packing. No need, I can handle it," Jack said as he left and headed to his room that was located on the 3rd floor. Steve looked at Jack's back as it disappeared from the corridor. He then looked at Brenda for answers. Seeing his gaze, Brenda gave him a sly smile as she said, "No need to worry about where he's going to. This is Crystal City, there's nowhere he can hide. As for if he wants to get out of the city, he." Reaching this point, Brenda gave a shallow laugh that gave Steve chills on his back. Chapter 3, Traveling. After Jack got into his room, he immediately took his luggage that he had already packed the previous day before he left. He then looked at the room that was painted white. The color of almost everything inside the room was either white or silver. This was the color that he had chosen in memory of his mother Anne. As he can remember till this time, his mother had silver hair and blue eyes. She was a beauty, and one thing was for sure, she was more beautiful than the 2 wives that his father had married. He had inherited his mother's features. If there was a part that resembled his father, that would be the way that his jaw was shaped. All the other features were like his mother's. This is what made Jack a handsome young man. With his rare features, he was a dream guy for most of the girls in Crystal City. Of course, as soon as they met Jack's siblings or cousins, they would immediately give up on him. After all, they didn't want to get on the bad sides of these nouveau riche kids. He looked around the room for a little while before he let out a sigh. He then murmured, "Mother, I'm not sure whether you would have wanted me to leave this place or not. But, I'm going to go out and prove myself. Although I won't be proving to them, at least, I would like them to know that your son wasn't useless at all." With that, he stepped out of his room and headed to the room that his mother had been using previously before she died. He entered the room that could be said to be a match to his in terms of colors. He stared around for a while. Then, he took a step forward and looked at the bedside cabinet. He opened it and took a big envelope. This was something that his mother told him to take it with him as long as he was sure that he wouldn't be coming back to the room again. Since he was leaving, he had no intention of coming back to this place. Alfonso family had wealth but had no moral values at all. After all, he had the blood of the Alfonsos running in his veins, but he was still being mistreated. He put the envelope into his bag. He was carrying a backpack. He didn't have many things as he was mainly saving money and he had bought nothing luxurious over the years. In the bag, there were only the few documents that were important to him, a few pairs of clothes and the envelope that he'd just taken. Without looking back, Jack left the room and left the mansion. He didn't find any of his half-siblings on his way out and he heaved a sigh of relief. Those siblings of his were a headache to him and he wasn't ready to face them when he was about to leave. So, he could say that it seemed that Lady Luck was on his side this time. As he left through the main gate, he reached the road that led to the main road. This was an exclusive road for the Alfonso family that had been built for them by the governor of the city. This was his show of appreciation and, of course, to curry favor with the Alfonso family. It seemed that he had celebrated too early. As after he got out of the gate, he found that Steve and Brenda were waiting for him. They had even called a taxi for him. He shook his head as he thought to himself, "Seems that they can't wait to get rid of me. Jack, here, we've called a taxi for you and we're even paying for you. No need to thank us, we're family after all." At this time, Brenda strode towards him as she spoke. Her voice was laced with both slyness and mischief. Jack could tell that something was wrong, but he couldn't point it out. For Brenda to do something like this, it wouldn't be as simple as getting him to leave faster. She must be having another plan. But since he couldn't see through her and he wanted to leave faster, he decided to use the taxi that she had called for him. "Thanks," he said indifferently before he got into the cab. Then, the driver immediately started the vehicle and left for the main road. As they watched as the cab disappeared into the distance, Steve couldn't hold himself anymore and asked, "So, what are you planning this time? You didn't pay for him at all, but you told him that you did so." "Humph, why would I waste my money on someone like him? As for what I am planning, it's simple. I told the taxi driver to tell me where he's going to take Jack. From there, we can see what we're going to do. I am going to make sure that he comes back while begging on his knees to be taken back into the family," Brenda said with a cold smile. Steve felt a chill running down his spine as he looked at her smile. He couldn't help but think to himself, "What a demon. I better not get on her bad side or things wouldn't be so good." Inside the cab, the driver drove the taxi as he looked at Jack via the rearview mirror. He was wondering why this handsome young man was leaving the family mansion where all the riches were. He could see that this young man was wearing some simple clothing. This way, he could guess that this young man's life wasn't good in there. But still, he thought that he shouldn't have left the family. As soon as they got to the main road, he asked, "Where are we going to, sir?" "Inchoate City," Jack replied calmly. He looked out of the window as he let his mind wander around. The driver nodded before taking the road that led out of the city. Before long, they had already left the city on their way to Inchoate City. It would take at least 5 hours to get there. Seeing that Jack wasn't paying attention to him, he immediately took out his phone and sent a text message to Brenda. She had given him $5,000 so that he could give her the location that Jack was going. He saw no reason to refuse such easy money and thus accepted. Furthermore, he knew that if he didn't accept, he would surely have a hard time in the city. Why would he die for a person whom even his family didn't value at all? As soon as he sent the message, he received a reply. "Tell me the exact location that you'll be dropping him." He immediately agreed and put his mind back to driving. He was also thinking about the fact that, since he was having the contact of the young lady of the Alfonso family, maybe in the future he could use his connection with her to make his life in the city easier. Jack had no idea that where he was heading to had already exposed. He just sat on the back seat of the cab as he thought about what he was going to do once he reached Inchoate City. He decided that he would open a small store with the money that he had been saving during the years. This way, he could have a source of income. Then, after the business expands, he would be able to get a footing in the city. Although he knew that he wouldn't be able to become a millionaire without getting an opportunity, he decided to be optimistic. Nobody knew what would occur in the future. He took his backpack and opened it. He then took the huge envelope that he had gotten from his mother's room. He had an urge to open and see what was inside it, but he forced down the urge. This envelope had been staying inside his mother's room throughout the years. He was the one that was making sure that his mother's room was tidy. Furthermore, those arrogant members of the Alfonso family thought that it was beneath them to enter a mistress's room. Thus, nobody had ever entered his mother's room since she died other than the servants that were doing the cleaning. Even though the servants knew that the mistress and her son weren't favored by the family, they didn't dare have a thought of stealing anything inside the room. If they were found to have stolen, their fates would be anything but good. Alfonso family had zero tolerance to thieves. So, although the cabinet that the envelope was placed in wasn't locked, nobody had taken it. Jack could clearly remember his mother's words about this envelope. It was simple: if you are thinking about marrying and starting your own family, you can open this envelope. Otherwise, don't do it. Remember, even before thinking about having a girlfriend, you'll have to open the envelope. He was 14 at that time. He didn't understand his mother's words, neither did he understand them even now. As long as he wanted to have a girlfriend, he would have to open the envelope first. But he would do as his mother wished him to do. He outbacked the envelope back into his backpack. He wasn't ready to get a girlfriend at this time. After all, a girl would mean that he would have to spend more, and he had yet to secure his source of income. Furthermore, although he was handsome, he was sure that as long as the girls knew that he wasn't rich, they would leave in disdain. There were some that had ever wanted to take him as a gigolo. Of course, Jack had never been tempted by such an offer. He wasn't that cheap. As Jack was still thinking, he forgot about time and he didn't know that 5 hours had already gone past. It was already 12, and at this time, a visage of a city could be seen from afar. The taxi driver's voice reached Jack's ears at this time. "Sir, we're about 5 minutes from the city." "Where exactly are you going? In Inchoate City are you going?" Jack looked at the city that was getting closer and closer as time moved. He sighed and said, "Take me to the Yellow Street." "Yes, sir," the driver replied as the car zoomed into the city. Chapter 4: Renting a Store. Inchoate wasn't a big city. It could be said to be a low-tier city. Crystal City was a mid-tier city. In this case, one could easily see that Crystal City was bigger and prestigious than Inchoate City. But still, Jack felt that this was the right place for him to start. Although Inchoate City was smaller than Crystal City, Alfonso family hadn't extended their hands into the city yet. After all, although the family was rich, it wasn't to the extent that it could cover all the cities. Having its influence in 2 cities was the maximum that the Alfonso family could manage. After all, the more cities they influenced, the more opponents the family would be facing. And although they had no great influence in the city, that didn't mean that they didn't exist. There were people from this city and others that had a cooperation with the Alfonso family. That meant that they could do the Alfonso family a favor by blocking him. But still, Jack thought that since he was just a small person and he wasn't going around offending others, they wouldn't care about him at all. That's what he was hoping for. The taxi entered the city before heading towards the eastern part of it. Crystal City was north of Inchoate City. Yellow Street that Jack wanted to go to was found in the eastern part of the city. Yellow Street wasn't that prestigious. It could also be said to be the poor side of the city. But that's where Jack could afford to start. The driver was wondering what a person from the great Alfonso family of Crystal City was going to do in the poor Yellow Street. But that was none of his concern. He simply took out his phone and texted Brenda on where he was taking Jack. On the other hand, Jack took out his phone. It wasn't a recent one but one that was about to go out of fashion. It was a smartphone but the version wasn't the latest one. It was an Infinix. He scrolled through and looked at the messages. He found that other than the promotional messages, there was no other message. It seemed that his father didn't care about him leaving the family after all. He sighed and checked his bank account balance. Since he began saving, he had never checked how much he had in his savings account. He always kept some cash aside that he could use. As for others, he saved all of it. Flyer's bank savings account balance is $432,753. He sighed as he saw this. It wasn't even $500,000. One had to know that Jack was saving this money since he was 13. In other words, this was a 6 years' worth of savings. It seemed that the money that he was receiving from the Alfonso family wasn't that much at all. After all, apart from his usual expenses, there was nothing else that Jack used the money that he had for apart from saving it. "We're here," the driver's voice brought him out of his thoughts. He then put back his phone into his backpack and got out of the taxi. He was just about to leave when the taxi driver shouted at him. "Hey, you haven't paid yet." Jack didn't bother to explain that Brenda had said that she had paid for him. After all, he knew that Brenda wasn't such a nice person that could pay for him something like that. Furthermore, she didn't know where he was heading to, so there was no way she could pay. "How much is it?" Jack asked. $1,180, the driver replied. Jack transferred $2,000 from his alternate account to the driver. "Then," he said, "keep the change." He wasn't ready to wait for change as he needed to get a place to stay and get lunch. The driver stared at Jack's departing figure and thought to himself, "He's such a generous young man. Too bad that those that are dealing with him are big potatoes that I can't dare to offend." And with that, he stepped on the accelerator and left the street. Crystal City, Alfonso main mansion. "So, you're telling me that Jack left the family and headed to Inchoate City?" A man's deep voice echoed inside the living room. "Yes, father. He said that he wanted to fend for himself. But I didn't think that he would go to such a backward place. What's more, he went to the poorest area, Yellow Street in Inchoate City. If anyone knows that he's a member of Alfonso family, then I'm sure that our family's reputation would go down." Brenda replied as she sat opposite a blonde-haired man. This was the current head of the Alfonso family and Jack's father, Dalton Alfonso. He had short blonde hair and well-trimmed beard. He was already edging towards his late 40s as he was 47 years old. His current expression wasn't looking good at all. After all, his son had just left the family without saying a word. What's more, he headed towards the poorest area of a small city. This was demeaning of his identity as the current CEO of Alfonso Group. He was Jack's father and a CEO of a multi-million group. If even his son was living life of a beggar, his reputation in the circle would surely be diminished. What's more, there were brothers and cousins of his who were eyeing his position. He was sure that they were going to use this so as to give him a good blow. After thinking things through, he found a solution. He tightened his heart and gave a verdict. From this moment onwards, Jack is no longer a member of Alfonso family. His words shocked all those that were present in the living room. More so those that were planning on what to do during the general meeting of the family. They had never expected that Dalton would be so cruel as to disown his own son just so as to maintain his position as the CEO. In other words, the position was more important than the son. Jack had no idea that he had just been disowned by his own father. But even if he knew, he wouldn't care as his father never cared about him anyway. So, there was no difference at all. He was currently in a small apartment that he'd just rented. This apartment wasn't that much shabby, although it was small. It had a living room and a bedroom. The living room was divided into two, where the small area of the two was the kitchen. There was water and electricity, so Jack wasn't worried about his life here. Although he was living in Yellow Street, he was living at the area that could be said where the rich of this street could be found. The apartment that he'd just rented had 3 floors. He was on the 2nd floor. Currently, he was eating some noodles for lunch. This was his frugal life. Although he had over $400,000 savings, he wouldn't use it for expenses. That was what he was going to use this capital. After his simple meal, he went to a shop's agent of the street. This was where if a person wanted to get a shop, either to rent or purchase, they would go there. The office was the only one in the entire street that had a rich man's vibe. It wasn't that big. It was a 4-story building that was painted blue and black. What a strange mixture. They called themselves Leviation Agencies. "Hello, sir, what would you like today? Renting or buying a shop?" The receptionist asked. "I would like to rent a shop in the upper areas of the street." "So, what's the price?" Jack asked. What kind of shop would you like to rent?" the receptionist lady asked politely. "Just a small shop that can be used for selling foodstuffs and other house necessities." Jack replied. He had already thought about what he was going to do. With a small shop to sell such things, he was sure that he wouldn't miss customers. "We have a grocery store that has stock already. It was sold by the owner to our agency 2 days ago. But all the things that can expire have all been sold out and only those with a long shelf life are left. If you're interested, we can rent the store to you." After going through a list on the counter, the receptionist replied. Jack thought for a moment and felt that it wasn't bad. So, he decided to get it. Seeing that Jack had accepted, the receptionist revealed a smile and said, "The store is located closer to the end of the street, bordering Alpine Street. It has an area of 1,500 square meters. This area is open and the traffic is good too. So, the rental cost would be $7,000 a month." Seeing Jack nodding, she continued, "As for the stock that is in the store, according to the calculations that had been made yesterday, they are worth $174,892. Jack thought for a moment and accepted. He could boost the store if the business was going to do good. If not, he would have to change it. As such, Jack completed the payment of $183,892. The extra $2,000 was for the service fee. The store had a license already which was included in the stock. Currently, Jack was left with $248,861. With this, if the business failed, he could start another one. With that, Jack left the store with the documents that showed that he was the current tenant of the store. The store wasn't that far from the agency office, it was just a 5-minute walk and Jack was there. Chapter 5. Future Operations. Present time. He was just about to go out of the store and take a look at the motorcycle when a person entered the store. It was a lady in her early 20s. "Hello, I need some groceries," she said as soon as she saw Jack behind the counter. Since he was having a customer, then he would surely make sure to operate the store first before checking out the bike. Jack sold to the lady a few groceries. Just like the man that had just left, she asked for the vegetables. Of course, Jack replied that they would be available the following day. After all, after getting the system, he would make sure that the customers get satisfied with his services. The total this time was $175. The lady paid via cash. She had wanted the vegetables the most, but since they weren't available, She bought some spices and other small things. As soon as he kept the money inside the drawer of the counter, the system's robotic voice echoed, followed by the vibration of his phone. Ding! You've earned $175. Multiplier applied. You've received $17,500. He took out his phone, and just as he had expected, the vibration was caused by the message from the bank. Flyer's bank account received $17,325. Current balance is $296,361. Jack could finally see that the system wasn't going to be cheated. After all, he was supposed to receive $17,500. But since he had received $175, then this amount was deducted from the total and the rest was sent into his bank account. Jack then thought to himself, "It seems that I can get back all the money that I spent as well as make a profit on my first day. This is going to be amazing." Just like that, Jack forgot about the motorcycle that he had just received as a reward from the system. The customers were coming into the store one after the other, and the number was increasing as time went on. Most of them asked for vegetables, but since there were no vegetables, they had no choice but to try the other stores. What's more, there were some of them that began complaining and left without purchasing anything. If you don't have vegetables, then why did you open the store? Hey, I just wasted a lot of time to get here. Now you're telling me that there are no vegetables? Hey, if you don't want to run the store, just close it down. But since Jack was in good mood from the amount of money that was entering his account, he definitely ignored the angered voices of the customers. Of course, he would bring the vegetables on the following day. He knew that no matter how much he listened to them, there was no way that he was going to change the situation. After all, there were no vegetables in the store and nothing could change that for the time being. That would change the following day. After all, most of the people that came to the store mostly wanted vegetables. It was around 9:30 p.m. that Jack closed the store. The customers had stopped coming to the store at around 9:10 p.m. The earnings today could be said to be the most that he had gotten in his life. He had earned a total of $8,345. This was added to the fact that the vegetables were not there, or else he would have earned a lot more. Although this could be seen as much of one considered that the stock had to be maintained, the profit from this was only around $1,050. But this was good too, as if he multiplied by 30, this would be at least $30,000 a month. The monthly rent was only $7,000. So, he could be said to be earning about $23,000 per month. But that was on a normal situation. With the 100 times income multiplier, Jack's income of the day wasn't that small. He took his phone and checked the balance in his account. Flyer's bank savings account balance is $1,124,011. His bank account already had over $1 million. On this day, the customers had mostly paid in cash. The total cash amount that he was having was $7,025. This was the amount that was given to him after the purchases. Jack immediately made a decision. All the cash that he would be receiving was the one that he would be spending on himself. As for the ones that came into his account, he would use all of that in his business. But, in the future, if there would be more money, he surely would spend on himself. He was already a millionaire, but he knew that this wasn't enough. If the Alfonso family wanted to cause him problems, there was no way that he could resist. He would be forced to go to another city again. He took out the key to the motorcycle as he closed the store. The streets were slightly lit up by streetlights. There were some areas that were dark as the streetlights weren't working there. But, since he was closer to the richer area, the area in front of his store was fully lit. As soon as he got out, he found that in the small parking space of the store, there was a modern bike parked there. There were some people that were looking at it in admiration. They kept talking about it. Do you know what kind of bike this is? No, do you? Of course I do. This is a Suzuki GSX or 1000 Phantom Special Edition. It's worth at least $170,000. What? That expensive? Of course it is. This bike has a top speed of 173 miles per hour. It's really cool. By the way, how do you know about all of that? Humph, I've been researching on the bikes recently. I will be buying one in the near future. Wow, it seems that you're rich. The Suzuki GSX R1000 Phantom Special Edition was painted black. It could merge well with the dark as long as the headlights were not switched on. Jack got to the small crowd and took out the key. He then pushed open the reluctant crowd before sitting on the bike. He could feel that it was kind of comfortable sitting on it. After ignition, he sped away from the store as the crowd of youngsters made way. Do you know that person? I think he's the one that was in the store. So, he's the new owner of the store? Maybe. After all, with such a bike, how can he be a small-time employee? The youngsters discussed for some time before they dispersed. On the other hand, Jack enjoyed the thrill of riding the bike. This wasn't his first time riding one, as he knew how to drive even cars. This was something that all members of Alfonso family had to know. So, although he wasn't like there, he was still able to learn most of the things like his other siblings. With the headlights on, all the areas that were dark were lit up. Thus, in just a few minutes, Jack had arrived at his apartment. He wanted to go for a few more rounds but felt that things won't work out well as at nighttime. Furthermore, Yellow Street wasn't somewhere safe, as there were some gangsters loitering around the street at such a time. He felt that he would have to get an assistant to help him with the store now that his source of income was assured. This apartment had a small parking space. Jack went forward and parked his bike. There were 2 Toyota Corolla cars that were parked there. Of course, they were old ones. But still, they were better than those that had to walk on foot while going to work. After locking the bike, he took the keys and the helmet which was on the bike but he didn't wear and headed back to his room. After a simple meal, he laid down on his bed and began thinking about what he was going to do the following day. First off, he would have to purchase the store. He found that the store was in a good place and he didn't lack customers. If not for the lack of vegetables in the store, then he was sure that he would have earned even more. After all, he had earned more than twice the amount that he had been saving for 6 years. The next thing was to find the source of stock. He would have to find a reliable source where he could get things to sell there in the store. For that, he would have to take a few trips around the city to find someone that he could come to an agreement with so that they can supply him with goods. Then, the assistant for the store. No, he would have to hand over the store to another person while he himself would deal with expanding the business or opening other businesses. There were some companies that had people that could do the job. These small companies were the ones that could offer the citizens the help in looking for jobs at a small monthly interest from their income. They were reliable. So, he wasn't going to get worried that the person that he would employ would run away with money. After all of their details were recorded in the company. Now, to expand the business, he would need to do more than just getting a store. If he wants to get a better source of income, he would have to go to a better street. But of course, he wouldn't close down the store here in Yellow Street. He might as well open branches for the store. After thinking it through, he found that it would be good if he could just open branches for Alfix grocery store in the city. This way, he could at least have something to hold on to first. Then, after the stores are opened, he could place the headquarters in the center of the city. Then, from there, if things went well, he would influence other cities too. With the 100 times income multiplier, he wasn't worried about money. The only thing that he would have you deal with would be getting connections and suppliers. As long as he was assured of the supply, he wouldn't have to worry about anything. Buzz. At this time, his phone vibrated. He took it and looked at it. It was a message from the butler of Alfonso family. Jack is no longer a member of Alfonso family. But since he has the bloodline of the Alfonsos, he would be given a compensation of $500,000. It is expected that Jack would not dare to use the Alfonso family's influence in any way or he would be punished. Flyer's bank account received $500,000. Current balance is $1,624,011. Not long after that. Ding! You've earned $500,000. Multiplier applied. You've received $50 million. Flyer's bank account received $50 million. Current balance is $51,624,011. Oh, that works too? Jack asked out loud. Chapter 6, A Veteran Braggart. Jack didn't know what to say about the system. The money that Alfonso family had given him was so that he could fend for himself without using the name Alfonso. But here, the system took it as an income. So, he had to know what's income and what's not. System, why is the compensation from the family being counted as income? Ding. It seems that you don't know the definition of income. I'll define it for you. Income is anything that comes in. If you earn money from stealing or robbing, that's income. If you go around being beaten up before being paid, that's income. Ding. In other words, as long as you do something and you get something else in return, that will be counted as income. Ding. Of course, the system limits what income will be multiplied. If you steal from a person, that will not be multiplied. If you receive bribes, that will not be multiplied. Ding. You have just received $500,000 from your family. That's as the income from defecting from Alfonso family. Since it's not counted as illegal as nobody is going to suffer, it has been multiplied. Jack was led in silence for a long period of time by the lengthy system explanation. He was trying to think of other sources of income that could be counted as legal by the system. Why is a bribe considered illegal? It doesn't hurt a person, does it? After thinking for a moment, he asked. Ding. Bribes are going to hurt a person. After all, if a person bribes you, it's either that the person has done a mistake and doesn't want to be punished, or he's incompetent and is trying to buy his way in. Ding. For the first one. If he did a mistake like hitting another person, that is considered hurting someone. Hey, that's too direct. I mean, there are other things, you know. Jack couldn't help but complain at the system's deduction of a mistake. Ding. Okay, he might have accidentally hit another person with a car, that's hurting others. Jack. Ding. He might have accidentally poured hot tea on another person's face, thus causing this person to be admitted in the hospital. This is considered hurting a person. You're helpless, Jack sighed. Ding. For the second one, if a person is incompetent and buys his way into a job, then he's definitely causing the competent but unemployed fellows out there to continue being unemployed. Jack. He seriously didn't know what to say about the system now. This system seriously had some issues. It definitely needed service. Leaving that aside, Jack focused in the issue of him no longer being a member of Alfonso family. Although he hadn't expected it, he wasn't surprised at all. After all, what was making him stay in the family mansion was his mother Anne. Now that she was dead for 4 years and Jack was an adult now, they could disown him. Although it was the butler that had sent the message, Jack knew that this was his father's decision. After all, he was the head of the family and the CEO of Alfonso Group. He didn't care that much about being removed as a member of the family. It wasn't like he was depending on the family name to do anything anyway. Furthermore, he has a system now and he didn't think that there would be any problem. After all, the system would multiply his income by 100 but his losses would remain the same. In order to make sure that he was no longer counted as a member of Alfonso family in the future, he saved the message that he had received in the email. If they saw him succeeding in the future and come trying to pull him back into the family, he would show the message to them. He had saved who the sender was plus the contact number. After that, Jack looked at his account balance. Now that he was having 50 million, it wasn't bad if he could get a good villa or maybe a mansion to stay in. With the way that the system was rewarding him, who knew if tomorrow he would be rewarded by a helicopter or maybe some sport cars? If so, with the small parking space of the apartment, there was nowhere that he was going to pack them. Furthermore, this was a backward place. So, if an expensive vehicle appeared here, it was obvious that there would be people surrounding it and it won't be difficult for several livestream celebrities to claim that the cars belong to their boyfriend. So, all of that would have to wait for the following. Jack had a nice sleep and only woke up at 7 in the morning. He went to the shared bathroom of the apartment and took a shower before changing into a blue jeans and a yellow t-shirt. He wore casually, after all, he wasn't going to an office. He got out of the room and headed downstairs with the key and helmet. Just like the previous day, there were several people that were curiously eyeing his bike. After all, it looked out of place. You know, this is my bike. I bought it yesterday. Really? Then, can you give me so that I can go for a ride? What do you mean? Do you know how much it cost me to buy this bike? It was $80,000. If I give you and you get an accident with it, how are you going to repair it? Ah. Hey handsome, why don't we go for a ride together on your bike? Cough. Not now, I still have to do something else. Maybe later. Jack was left speechless after hearing the conversation. As he pushed through the crowd, he found a guy who seemed to be in his mid-20s leaning on his bike. See, this was what I was talking about. This was just a bike that cost about $170,000. Yet, here, there was someone already claiming to own it. He even said that it cost only $80,000? What a shameless guy. Furthermore, he even found an excuse to evade riding the bike. But, if you have somewhere to go, then why are you still leaning on the bike instead of hurrying on your way? Jack sighed before he approached the bike. As soon as the young man saw Jack approaching, he frowned and waved his hand impatiently. Hey buddy, you might not have heard, but I own this bike. And am about to go somewhere and am not lending it to anyone. Jack was left speechless once again. Who the hell said that he wanted to borrow the bike? That's my bike, alright? He simply shook his head as he took out the key and shook it in front of the guy's eyes. He then patted the helmet that he was holding in his left hand. Oh, you own your own bike? I am not going for racing at all. I've got somewhere to go. The guy raised his brows slightly before waving Jack off. Jack? Is this person a retard? He wondered to himself. Ahem, I mean I own the bike. Jack coughed slightly and pointed at the bike that the man was leaning on. The guy looked behind him before he looked at Jack with a face that was full of question marks. I don't see any bike behind me. Jack's twitched as he heard this. He sighed and said, I mean, I own the bike that you're leaning on. As he said this, he shook the key in front of the guy once again. The guy frowned for a moment before his face revealed as if he had just gotten an epiphany. He coughed embarrassedly and moved to the side. Jack just shook his head, got on the bike, put on his helmet before he accelerated away from the apartment area. It was only after he left that the crowd reacted. Wait a second, didn't that guy just now claim that the bike was his? Yeah, right. Where's this guy? He shamelessly claimed that he had bought it yesterday. He was so smug. It turns out that it wasn't even his. So, that's why he was just leaning there and didn't dare to give the bike to someone for a ride. I knew it. I didn't see a key on him. Shameless, you're also bragging. Wait a second, where's that guy? He was here a second ago. I swear I saw him standing next to him and I didn't see him leave. That guy sure is fast. The crowd was left speechless once again. It turned out that as they were still understanding the situation, the guy had already fled. What was surprising was that in the crowd of about 20 people, nobody saw him getting away. Jack knew nothing of this, but he was still reminding himself that he had to get a house on this very day. Otherwise, it won't be long before a person says that she was his girlfriend. Speaking of a girlfriend, he wondered what was contained in the envelope that his mother had left him. Still, he put that thought aside as he headed towards the company that had people that were looking for employment. With the bike speed, he got there in slightly over 30 minutes. It was located in another street that could be said to be better than Yellow Street. Not only was it cleaner, but the buildings here were also better. This was the Anson Street. It could be said to be where people came to look for job. Or, it could be said that this was the headquarters for those non-employed from several streets that were like Yellow Street. He arrived in front of Dan's Brokers. After parking his bike, he headed straight for the entrance of the building. It was bigger than the shop's agency back in Yellow Street. As he entered, he found that inside was crowded. Although it was crowded, he could see that it was organized well. After all, although the ground floor was an open space, there were plaques hanging in several areas showing the different divisions of professions. There were sales department where he wanted to go to, cleaning department, security department, delivery department, and so on. As soon as they saw him entering, those that were in charge of several departments ran to him. "Hello, sir, what department would you like to visit?" One of them, who was a beauty, asked with a charming smile. Jack was somehow startled when he saw them rushing towards him but calmed down after hearing the question. "I mainly want the sales department, but I could use the cleaning and delivery department as well," he said after a moment contemplation. Chapter 7: First Employees. After hearing what Jack said, those from the other departments that Jack hadn't mentioned left while feeling dejected. Of course, they didn't forget to throw envious gazes at the three that had stayed behind. This place was competition. If people of your department were given a job, then your salary would increase. It's just like how commission was earned. If many people of your department get employed, then you would get much income from the interests that the company would be cutting from the income of those employed through the company. This way, sir. The lady showed Jack to her department. Since Jack had said that he wanted those from the sales department but he could also use those from the cleaning and delivery department, it meant that he was prioritizing the sales department. After taking a seat, the lady asked, "What kind of employee do you want? A charming girl? A mature lady? A youngster? An able-bodied man?" Jack was rendered speechless by this person on charge. It was as if the people here were clothes and she was talking about the clothing styles. Anyway, he still answered, "I want someone capable. I don't want a person that would be needing my supervision every moment. And it should be someone that can work in a grocery store." Hearing Jack's description of what he wanted, the lady nodded her head. Then, she turned towards the people who were looking for a job and called out, "Agnes, come over." A lady who could be said to be a beauty of 89 stood up from the crowd under the envious gazes of her fellows. She walked hurriedly towards the counter. According to what he saw, she had to be in her late 20s if not her early 30s. The way that she was walking was filled with both determination and confidence. Jack nodded as he saw this. It seemed that this wasn't a person that was going to be shy in front of customers. He just hoped that she was a person that could work under minimal or no supervision at all. As soon as she arrived at the counter, the lady who was in charge of the sales department did the introduction. "This is Agnes. She has worked in a grocery store for 3 years and the store was closed due to the owner of the store leaving the city. She hasn't been on duty for a week now, so her skills haven't gotten rusty yet." Jack nodded. This was what he was looking for. Since she had experience in running a grocery store, then she could advise him on what he would be needed to do in terms of stock and prices. One had to know that although Jack had studied, he wasn't proficient in running a store. Furthermore, a grocery store was different from a bakery. So, everything had their own way that needed to be followed for the profits to be maximized. He nodded his head to show his acceptance. As for the details and whatever, this broker's company could deal with it. If there were any problems that were going to occur, then he would be sure to come back to this company to demand for compensation. Well, with 50 million in his account, the store could be said not to be worth that much. But still, there was no harm in making sure that his first business didn't fail. So, after he was done with the sales department, he immediately headed to the delivery department. This was another area that needed trustworthy people. It wouldn't be good if the person that was supposed to deliver goods suddenly runs away with the goods. The one in charge here was a middle-aged man. Here, after giving the terms such as knowing the city well and that person must have done several grocery deliveries, knows how to drive and so on, he got a person. His name was George. Although he was only 23 years old, he had been working as a delivery person for 5 years and none of his previous employers had a complaint. Jack nodded. This was what he wanted. As for the cleaning department, there were not that many conditions other than being able to work with others in the store. After he was done selecting, it was time to discuss about payment and contract. Jack wanted long-term employees, not those that would work for 3 days and then disappear or quit. So, the sales department would be taking $3,000 a month, the delivery $2,500 and cleaning would be $2,000 a month. The term that they had signed was that they would be paid the first month in advance but the working period would be 6 months. After 6 months, if they wanted to continue working for him, they would sign another contract to extend their working period. As for the service fee, it was just $1,000 which Jack paid without much thought. In total, he had spent $8,500 on this trip. But even so, the amount in his account didn't even budge. With the issues done, Jack left the broker's company with 3 employees. Agnes the confident lady, George, the resolute young man, and finally Charles, a reserved young man. Since he didn't have a car that could carry the 3 of them, they had to take a taxi. But they were not going to the store immediately. They were going to Delight Mall. The reason for that was simple: he had to get a pair uniform for his employees. After that, he would see if there were things that they needed to make their work efficient. Seeing that they had arrived in front of one of the most popular malls in the city, the 3 couldn't help but wonder if the grocery store was located here. Of course, this thought was fleeting as it was eliminated the next second. After all those that opened their business inside Delight Mall were super rich and wouldn't need a small company like Dan's Brokers to help them get employees. As long as they posted that there was vacancy, it was a sure bet that there would be a long line of graduates looking for an opportunity to be employed. The reason as to why they were here, Jack told them: "We have to get you some uniform for the store. The store is unique, so you'll get several pairs of uniform. We're here because the uniforms are going to be custom made." As soon as the trio heard this, they were aware. It seemed that the boss that had employed them this time was going to be generous. After entering the mall, they headed to the second floor where clothes stores and shops were located. Terran Designers. That's where Jack took the trio. A saleslady immediately welcomed them with a smile. "Hello, sirs and madam, what would you like today? I want you to design a uniform for these 3. And you can help me by making more of them, not just a few," Jack said. After hearing Jack's words, the lady nodded and said, "This way, sir. I'll call the manager." Jack and the trio sat in the waiting area as the lady hurried into a small office to call the manager of the store. Although the 3 couldn't be said to be rich, they had visited such a mall either during their lines of work, shopping, or window shopping. Thus, they weren't looking around like village people coming to a city for the first time. After about a minute, a middle-aged man in a suit hurried over from the office while accompanied by the saleslady. "Hello, sir, I am the manager of this branch, Calvin Dexton. I have been told that you would like us to design a uniform for you?" He greeted Jack before asking. "That's right. I want a good uniform. One that has been designed well by top designers. For men, a shirt, a trouser, shoes, and a blazer. As for women, it would be a blouse, a skirt, shoes, and a blazer." Jack went on to give the description of what he wanted. Of course, the shoes and things like a badge wouldn't need too much effort, as shoes could be easily found in the store and the badge could be easily designed. He didn't want to go into different stores just to get this done. That was the reason as to why he wanted everything to be done by Terran Designers. They were a top clothing company in the country. Seeing that Jack was a big client, the manager treated him even better and with more respect. The name that Jack gave wasn't Alfix Grocery Store, this was another person's name. So, he simply gave the name of the store following his own name, Jackson Enterprise. For the badge, they would have to add a G.D, which stood for Grocery Department. He was going to start an enterprise, and the grocery was just one of the businesses that he was going to run. The trio who were listening from the side were shocked after hearing that Jack was going to start an enterprise. They felt proud that they were going to be the first employees. After getting out of the mall, Jack looked at the 3 employees of his and said, "Let's get some cars for the store." Chapter 8, Buying Cars. It wasn't long before they arrived in front of a Bentley Motors supply branch in Inchoate City. They were already in the center of the city, and as a result, they got there in a little over 10 minutes. Jack wanted to buy several cars. One would be for delivery, another for his employees' transportation, and finally, his own car. A bike was good, but during harsh weather, it wasn't suitable at all. This Bentley store had several cars that he could purchase. So, without any hesitation, the 4 of them entered the shop. It was like a showroom, as he could see that there were several cars that were put on display. He nodded to himself. As expected of this brand, there were several cool-looking cars here. As a young man, his blood obviously boiled as he looked at several sport cars that were present here. He kept the urge of going over there and buying all the sport cars in the shop as he looked at the salesperson that was heading his way. It was a man who was in his early 30s. He could be said to be handsome, but not by much. Just like always, the store wasn't congested as cars were different from clothes and other things. "Welcome to our shop, sir. We have different types of cars here. We have sport cars, SUVs, pickups, and so on. I'm sure you'll like them." As soon as the man arrived in front of Jack, he began introducing what was present in the shop. The other salespersons could only blame themselves for being slow to react when it came to receiving a customer. They were paid in terms of commission. After all, the one that sold the most expensive car would obviously receive a high commission. From the Jack's handsome looks, it was obvious that he wasn't a street boy that had just come to admire the cars. What's more, he was being followed by 3 people, and they could easily that all 3 of them were older than him. "Well, I want an SUV and a sports car." Jack was direct about what he wanted. There was no need for him to beat around the bush. He wanted a car and he wanted to buy it. Only then would he be able to do things faster, as the store still needed to be opened. After hearing Jack's words, the salesperson's eyes immediately lit up. This was money. An SUV and a sports car. This was money falling directly onto his lap in form of commission. The other salespersons were even more dejected. They kept on scolding themselves for not acting faster. "This way, sir," the salesperson led the way as he showed Jack and the trio the cars that were available. After going a few rounds in the shop, Jack decided on a Bentley Bentayga. The salesperson immediately gave the introduction. The hybrid powertrain at the heart of the Bentayga Odyssean Edition delivers Bentley's hallmark combination of exhilarating power in tandem with an impossibly refined ride. Its pairing of an advanced E-motor with a 3.0-liter twin-turbocharged V6 petrol engine can deliver a combined 456 brake horsepower, 462 PS, and 516 pound-ft, 700 Nm of torque. You can drive for at least 28 miles, 45 kilometers, on electric power only, WLTP, a significant increase compared to the previous model. The Bentayga Odyssean Edition, limited to just 70 cars globally, can be considered a new milestone on Bentley's sustainability journey. It has an intelligent navigation system as well as it is connected to Wi-Fi and online radio. When we talk about comfort, the front seat comfort specification is fitted as standard, offering ventilation in both front seats, plus a massage function and winged comfort headrests. The seats also gain adjustable cushion and backrest bolsters. Jack listened to the lengthy description of the SUV and nodded. This was just a good car for his employees, just in case they would have to be moving around. After all, he was going to start an enterprise. How much for the car? Seeing that everything was good, he asked for the price. Well, it wasn't like it was going to matter about the price, as he had enough money in his account. The thing that made him so happy was the fact that there were only 70 of such cars in the world. Thinking of this, he had an idea. How many of this car aren't sold yet? He wanted to buy all the cars that were remaining. The salesperson was just about to talk about the price when he was interrupted by Jack's question. He opened his mouth, but he couldn't reply for a while. Seeing Jack's serious expression, he immediately said, "Ahem, there were about 38 the last time that I checked last week. As for the price, it would cost $650,399. Jack nodded. The price wasn't that high. So, he would pay. But after hearing that out of 70 there were only 38 left, and that was the previous week, he immediately got anxious and said, "Don't worry about the price. Look at how many of the cars are left and make sure that they're not going to sell them. I'm going to buy them all." Those that heard him were left awed and speechless at the same time. "Did you hear? That guy wants to buy all the Bentley Bentaygas that are left in the world. This person sure is rich. I heard that there are 70 of the same design globally. It has been a while now. It's obvious that they have already sold some of them. I guess Philip is lucky to get such a customer today. He'll surely get much commission. Hey, if there are only 70 of such cars globally, then why is this one in a showroom of such a small city? This is the policy. They will rotate in different shops in different cities. Next week, This car would have been taken to another city if it wasn't going to be purchased. Oh, I get it. Even Agnes, Charles and George were surprised on seeing that Jack wanted to buy more than 10 cars that cost over $650,399. They then thought to themselves, our boss is rich for sure. Philip, the salesperson that was attending to Jack, immediately rushed to call the manager of the shop. In just about 2 minutes, the manager came rushing alongside Philip. At this time, a small crowd was already gathering around Jack. Even those that had come to the shop to window shop had already forgotten about it. Hello sir, I am Evans Morris, the manager of Bentley Shop Inchoate branch. I've heard that you were asking about how many of the Bentegas are left. According to the information that I've just checked, there are 24 of them left. As soon as he arrived, the manager greeted Jack respectfully before telling him about his inquiry. Although only 24 are left, I want them all. Can you organize for them to be delivered? I'll come back tomorrow to give you the address for the delivery. Jack said. That can be done, sir. As soon as he said that, he immediately charged back to his office to do the booking so as to make sure that none of the remaining cars were sold. After all, if he sold these cars in his shop, he might even get promoted. Jack looked at Philip and handed him the card. Philip received the card with trembling hands. He was just about to go and complete the procedures for the car that was currently available in the shop when Jack stopped him. We haven't seen the sports car yet. This immediately reminded Philip that Jack wasn't here for the SUV alone, but for a sports car and a pickup. His eyes shone with even more splendor as he thought of the commission that he was going to receive at the end of the day. He immediately became enthusiastic as he led the way towards the sports car section. The crowd followed along as they wanted to see what this nouveau riche will buy next. He found a Bentley Continental that caught his eye. And Philip immediately gave the introduction of the car. This is a Continental GT. There is no more accomplished combination of high performance with the practicality you need to truly enjoy long journeys. Its twin-turbocharged 4.0-liter engine has the power to deliver exhilarating performance the moment you put your foot down, accompanied by the much-loved exhaust note that only a V8 engine can provide. With 4 driving modes ranging from comfort to sport, and the facility to configure your own settings, the Continental GT guarantees a gratifying drive. The power of the Continental GT is truly formidable: 542 brake horsepower, 550 PS, 0 to 60 in 3.9 seconds, 0 to 100 km per hour in 4.0 seconds, and an incredible top speed of 198 miles per hour, 318 km per hour. Yet power is just one dimension of this car's driving experience. Connected services include online radio, over-the-air map updates for the sat-nav and traffic sign recognition. The My Bentley smartphone app adds features such as perimeter alert asterisk, informing you if your car leaves a predefined area, alongside the facility to preheat the cabin to an optimum temperature. There's also the intelligent navigation system, wireless charging, Wi-Fi and so on. The introduction was indeed detailed. Jack nodded and asked for the price. The price of this Continental GT is $7,399,999. Philip said with his eyes shining. It was obvious that after this, the amount of commission that he would receive would make his life have a qualitative leap. Okay, I'll get one. Now, for the pickup. Jack nodded as he made his decision before turning his attention to the pickup section. Chapter 9, Supplier. After looking at the pickups present in the shop, he found that they were mostly luxury pickups and not those that matched the work of carrying a grocery's supplies. So, he decided to do the payment for what he was going to buy first. He was buying 24 Bentley Bentegas. The total price was $15,609,576. Plus, he was buying a sports car, a Continental GT whose price was $7,399,999. For the shipping fee, a number plate, insurance and so on, Jack paid $27,000. This was to make sure that it was going to be fast. Then, there came the issue of customization. He wanted 5 of the Bentley Bentegas to have the logo for his new enterprise. Of course, since the 5 vehicles would be in the grocery department, they would have a G.D added below the name Jackson Enterprise. As for the others, Jack decided that they should have the logo for his brand. Of course, the logo wasn't out yet and he was going to look for a designer for it. Then, it would be sent to the clothing shop and the Bentley shop. As for his sports car, there was nothing that needed to be added. He felt that it was okay the way that it was. For the customization, it cost him a total of $149,500. This was for all the 24 cars. Of course, since he was going to use the one that was present in the shop currently, the customization would be done after the others were delivered. It took more than an hour for all the procedures to be carried out. Immediately after that, Jack got out of the shop with the manager Evans Morris and the gleeful Philip under the envious and odd gazes of the other salespersons and those that were visiting the shop. Jack had just spent a total of $23,186,075. This brought his balance to $28,429,436. This was just enough to ensure that the store was fully supplied with stock. Now, his Jackson grocery department would only be left with the issue of getting the stock and expansion. Since there was no vehicle present in the shop that could be used for the grocery delivery, he changed his destination to the available truck shop. It was a Freightliner shop. He decided to leave his sports car and the bike at the Bentley shop as they left on the SUV. Since George was a delivery person before, he drove while Jack sat on the passenger seat. Charles and Agnes both sat on the back seats. After getting inside this car, he felt that there was no exaggeration when they talked about comfort in this Bentayga. He nodded in appreciation. George's driving skills were good as he had gone to the driving school and he used to participate in racing before he became a deliveryman. Of course, it was only for a year and a half that he participated in racing. It didn't take them that long to reach the shop that had trucks. The trucks were displayed in the showroom for people to admire. He didn't want to wander around so much as it was already getting close to lunchtime. He had to complete things faster so that he could open the store on this very day. He found a Cascadia Freightliner. This truck was considered somehow big and at the same time not big. Well, it could be said to be the appropriate size for a city. It wasn't like those cargo trucks that moved very long distances. It had refrigeration system, just what was needed. With this, he wouldn't have to worry about grocery items going bad. He asked George if he could drive it and he said that there were only a few cars that he couldn't drive and a truck wasn't among them. So, with a total cost of $419,350, he left the shop claiming that the truck would be taken later on or it would be delivered to the address that he would give if there would be a need for it to. After they left the shop, Jack asked George for the place where they could get a supplier. George immediately drove the SUV to the outskirts of the city. Of course, the area that they headed towards wasn't like Yellow Street. Although this part of the city wasn't congested by office buildings, he could see that the area was clean. This was the industrial side of the city. It wasn't long before they arrived in front of a 7-story building that had a large base area. There were several trucks and pickups that were going to and fro here. After entering the gate, they were invited politely into the waiting area. After all, the Bentayga was a high-profile vehicle and as a result, they were treated with respect. Since George had been here before, he was familiar with the procedures. Before long, they met with the manager in charge of the sales department, Kevin. "Welcome, Mr. Jack." Since he was told not to use the Alfonso name, Jack decided not to use it at all. "I would like to have a cooperation with your company." Of course, the cooperation is for the supply of the grocery products. Jack went straight to the point. The amount of stock that you want is what will determine the cooperation." Kevin replied. "The amount of stock hasn't been fully determined, but what you can be sure of is that it cannot decrease but it will keep on increasing," Jack said. He hadn't thought of this point when he came. But still, he was going to expand the business further and there was no need for him to worry about the stock that he would be getting being excess. Now, that's a problem. You know, to sign a contract, we will need to get a figure on which we can both agree on. Kevin frowned after seeing that Jack hadn't even prepared anything. Well, this can be said to be the preparation. During this week, the stores that I am intending on starting will be opened. So, that's the reason as to why the stock isn't determined yet. Jack then went on to explain that he was opening grocery stores all over the city. After hearing this, Kevin's tensed brows slightly relaxed. He then asked, "So, what amount of stock would you like to start with?" "I want to start with $500,000, probably if there's any in your warehouse I can take it now. As for the others, I will inform you on when they're needed," Jack replied. After hearing that the initial amount of stock that Jack wanted was going to cost $500,000, and this was the initial stock, Kevin was relieved. It seems that he's not here to joke, he thought to himself. After they came to an agreement, the contract was drafted. The contract of supply was that the maximum stock that would be supplied would be worth $30 million in 3 months. This was the time that Jack was going to starting, and could be said that it would be a testing period. Of course, Jack wasn't worried about losses at all. After all, with the 100 times income multiplier system, the income would definitely be higher than the losses. But he wasn't ready to run a business at a loss. After they were done with the contract, Jack brought them to the store that he'd purchased the previous day. The three raised their brows. They were wondering to themselves, this guy is so rich, why would he need to open a store in such a backward place? But they didn't dare to ask the question out loud. So, they followed Jack into the store. Although the store wasn't that big, it was decent in the street that they were in. Jack turned and looked at them. Then, he said, "If you guys work well, then I might make you the leaders of the branches of the surrounding streets. This is the benefit of being my first employees. As for the salary, don't worry about it. The better you perform, the better your salary. So, don't worry about the figures that are written on the contracts." Jack ignored their astonished gazes and added fuel to the already burning flame. "Thank you, boss." The three thanked him in unison. They clearly knew that their qualifications weren't that high. So, for them to be in charge of an entire street was something big, not to mention a few other streets. Jack nodded and said to George, "The truck will be delivered here in about 30 minutes. You'll go to Pristine Agriculture Products, PIP, to get the stock that I just paid for." "Yes, boss," George replied. His excitement couldn't be hidden at all. After all, he had just driven an SUV and he was going to drive a popular truck, Cascadia. He liked racing and thus was a car enthusiast. Jack then looked at Agnes and Charles and said, "I guess you two know what to do?" "Yes, boss." The two nodded in reply. Jack then left them the $7,000 that he'd earned the previous day for them to get lunch as well as for change. He then left telling them that he would be back before the closing time of the store. He wasn't worried about the issue about the prices as the logbook was there. He had told the truck shop manager that George was the one that would receive the Cascadia Freightliner. Now, he was going to take his meal before going to the real estate agencies to get himself a good house. He left with the Bentayga. After all, his bike and the sports car were left at the Bentley shop. Chapter 10, Prince and Princess Palace. Jack ate in an ordinary street stall. Of course the car attracted attention of the crowd, but Jack wasn't in the mood to discuss with them. Immediately after he was done with the meal, he immediately headed back towards the center of the city. The mansion that he wanted to buy wasn't found in the streets like Yellow Street. He had to find an estate that could accommodate his cars without causing discussions among those that would be seeing it. But there was a decision that he made: the house that he'd just rented, the apartment, he wouldn't leave it. He would be staying there in case he came to Yellow Street to supervise the stores. It didn't take more than 30 minutes before he arrived in front of a real estate agency. It was called Homescope Properties Limited. This was amongst the popular real estate agencies present in the city. After parking his car, he immediately headed towards the 5-story building. After entering, the service could be said to be good enough as he was welcomed by the enthusiastic salespersons. "Hello, handsome, what would you like today? Buying a house? Renting? We offer all of these services at an affordable price," one of the sales ladies immediately introduced. The others that had rushed over immediately shook their heads as they left while feeling dejected. Currently, Jack was having $27,510,086 in his account. So, he wasn't worried about buying a house. So he went straight to the point. I want to buy a good mansion that has a good parking space. One that can accommodate at least 6 vehicles. Hearing what Jack just said, the lady's eyes widened as admiration immediately filled them. This was obviously a rich person. He wanted a mansion that had a parking space of at least 6 vehicles. This implied that he had at least 6 cars. So, she straightened her posture and made sure that her clothes were okay. By okay, I mean that she made sure that the top was revealing a little skin. Obviously trying to honey trap Jack. But who was Jack? He had been a member of Alfonso family for 19 years of his life. It was obvious that he had experienced such situations before. After all, although he wasn't favored in the family, if the girl could get together with him, they could use him as a bridge to meet with his other brothers. He was experienced and this wasn't moved at all. He ignored this and asked, "Do you have a mansion that matches my taste?" "Yes, we do have it. It is in the most popular and suitable place for people with a high status. There are actually 2 mansions there and they're named Prince and Princess Palace or PPP. The location of these 2 mansions the north of the city, not too far from the center. The area is free from traffic and thus there would be no problems like noise. The security there is top-notch. What's more, the environment is relaxing. There's an artificial lake that is at the center of the 2 mansions separating them. They are connected by a bridge that is made by the most popular designer in the country. There's a garden where there are several rare and almost extinct species of trees are planted. It can be said to be the most luxurious place for a person to stay. As for the parking, there's a huge parking space that can accommodate at least 10 cars. Jack was impressed by the mansion. It seems that this was what he wanted. But he knew one thing for sure, the price of the mansion wasn't going to be low at all. The saleslady had mentioned these 2 mansions on purpose. If they're sold, not only would she get a higher commission, but she would get promoted. She made sure to give the description of the mansions well so that Jack could get the image of it. Just to make sure that Jack was convinced, she brought him to the highest floor where there were several models of the mansions and villas that they were selling. Jack looked at the model and felt that the lady's words were no exaggeration at all. This place was indeed a palace. What's more, it was surrounded by a high 15 meters perimeter wall. This in itself was a show of the security. After looking at it for a while, he looked at the lady and asked, "So, how much for this mansion?" "The mansion is priced at $38 million. Of course, it was this price that has made it not to be sold for a while now. After all, Inchoate City is a small city, but the designer of the mansion had the intention of attracting the big shots here." The lady was quite honest with her words. Even she knew that the price was high and most people would back down immediately after hearing the price. So, what is the payment plan? Jack had expected that the price would be high. He could see that the level of the Prince and Princess Palace was higher than the one that Alfonso family owned. You can pay 50% deposit and the rest have to be paid within a year. As for things like renovation, you'll not have to worry about them. The mansions are ready and one can move in immediately. The lady replied. Her eyes were already shining with the dollar sign. She could see that money was just getting closer. After thinking for a moment, his balance was only $27,510,086. That meant that he was still short of a little over $10.5 million. To get this, he would need a little while longer. Furthermore, he wanted to expand the grocery department. Thus, he still needed money. So, he couldn't spend all of the money in his account yet. 50% was $19 million. So, Jack decided that he would pay $20 million deposit. Then, he would pay the rest during the month. After making the decision, he looked at the lady and said, "I will pay $20 million deposit. The rest will be paid during the month. Do you think you can handle the procedures?" The lady immediately got excited. Jack didn't try bargaining about the price and immediately paid a deposit of $20 million. The remaining would be less than half, only $18 million that Jack had just said that would be paid within a month. So, she smiled brightly and said, "Of course, I can handle it. But it would still need the manager for the contract to be completed." Jack nodded and sat on a chair in the waiting area. In about 10 minutes, a lady rushed towards him with a few documents. She immediately introduced herself. "Hello, esteemed guest, I am Sabrina Folk, the manager of Homescope Properties Limited in Inchoate City branch." Jack returned the greeting politely as he introduced himself. There was no need for him to put on airs. So, he was a simple person, just like how he was back at home. "Mr. Jack, we can give you a 10% discount for the mansions. So, the price will be $34,200,000. So, after the $20 million down payment, you'll be left with $14.2 million. As for the duration of the payment of the balance, it's always supposed to be paid within a year. So, you can take your time. During this 1 year, you will have the certificates of ownership for the mansions. But if the 1-year period passes without the payment being completed, the certificate will be revoked and you'll be refunded with 85% of your payment." "I don't know if you can agree with these terms?" Sabrina asked after she talked about the terms of the contract that had to be signed. Jack nodded. He was going to finish the payment within a month. He didn't like having debts hanging over his head. After the duo came to an agreement, Jack signed the contract and the procedures for handing over the ownership of the mansions was completed after half an hour. After Jack did the payment, he was left with $7,510,086. This was enough for the expansion of the grocery department. With more stores, he would be able to get more money and the income would be multiplied by 100. That way, his account wouldn't be left empty. Jack left the agency accompanied by the manager, Sabrina, to go and take a look at the mansions. It took them about 20 minutes to get there in Jack's Bentayga. Just as they had said, the area that the mansions were located was an area that was silent. He could see that there were several luxurious mansions that had been built in the area. This was obviously the Richest residential area. This residential area was known as Windhill Residential Area. This was where the leaders of the city and other bigwigs stayed when they visited the city. One thing that interested Jack the most was the fact that Prince and Princess Palace was located at the heart of the residential area. This meant that this was the most expensive mansion in the entire city. Jack was sure that if he went to another city, then there would surely be other mansions that would be worth more than this. He knew that there were several people that could afford to buy this palace. But, who would waste so much money to buy a mansion in a small city? This was the thing that had made the palace remaining hanging for over 2 years since completion. Jack looked at the high perimeter wall and the majestic gate in front of him. Then, after Sabrina showed her ID, the guards immediately opened the gate, allowing Jack to drive his Bentayga.